really owe everything to someone who's now become a friend called Vincent Messina. I had a sort of career in bands and as a record producer, and he got me involved in producing various Italian pop stars and singer-songwriters. So I had sort of more of a profile in Italy than I probably did in the UK. But I had played in a band called Livewire in Rome. We'd done a tour of Italy. And evidently Dario Argento had been to see me play at a club in Rome. And Vincent introduced me to him at a party in Rome, and he was like, he was already in post-production on Phenomena. And he said, "Oh, I loved your band, I loved your band." I had absolutely no idea who Dario Argento was, as I've explained before, not sort of being an avid horror fan, let alone really film fan. I mean, I wasn't, obsessive about it. And Vincent filled me in, he said, "Oh, he's the master of horror." So anyway, he asked me if I would help out, first of all, with the guys from Goblin, with Fabio and Claudio, to help them because they were in a real rush and there was too much for them to do. So I said yes, and I started initially working with them in the studio. And then I think we kind of agreed that our styles were sort of different in a way. And so we split up into different studios and carved up some of the cues. I did very little for Phenomena, honestly. Though some of what I did is on the soundtrack and not in the film, actually. So that's really my introduction to it was really through Vincent, and it was my first experience on a movie. I never intended to be a film composer, never intended to be an Italian film composer. It was just one of those things which happened to me. Anyway, so the Phenomena thing is really what got me going. I got various people like Andy Sex Gang from the British band, the Sex Gang Children, to come and do some sort of moaning and sort of strange vocal effects for my tracks on Phenomena. And also then we wrote some songs for the film too. And at that point, I think Dario was much more... Dario's always been very much into heavy metal, which I haven't been. And this is an important point, which I'll come on to with Demons 2, in terms of what that soundtrack is. But anyway, that was my introduction to the Italian film scene, and Phenomena obviously was successful, like all Dario's films have been, certainly in Italy at that point. So that's the long answer, really, to how I got to be a film composer at all.
Hey, it works!
It's interesting, I was aware of Goblin, really, because my girlfriend had been to see Suspiria. And I, as I've said famously in various other interviews, am not really a fan of horror films. I certainly wasn't at that time. And she came back from seeing Suspiria and said it was just terrifying, but amazing. She loved the music to it. And so I was aware of Goblin and what they'd done. Having sort of then worked with them in the studio, I think our styles were very different. And I think Claudio is very much more into kind of, so it seemed to me, I don't mean to be rude in a way, but into pomp rock. It's very sort of elaborate synth-based stuff, like Yes, or like any of those sort of British 70s pomp rock bands, which personally I loathe to the passion. But anyway, that's the worst of what they did. But Goblin also did some just fantastically innovative, different stuff using voices like they did in Suspiria. But anyway, I have a very different take on things. I mean, I didn't study to be a film composer, so I could really only do just be honest and to respond naturally as I could to the movies that I was being asked to do. I hadn't actually watched Demons 1, whilst doing Demons 2. The opening titles thing. Yeah, that was just, I mean, to me that was like kind of more gothic, you know, it was more kind of over the top and more, you know, though clearly at that point we're all using modern instrumentation, using synths and drum machines and stuff. You know, it still to me was more in the Hammer horror tradition than Italian, really. That's how I feel. That's certainly what was in my mind. Well, in Demons 2, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, this was my second thing that I did with Dario. I mean, it's produced by Dario, and Dario was very hands-on in Demons 2. I was also given the job of picking the songs in it. And it was the first film really that I did, you know, where you know, I was responsible for the whole thing, you know, all the score, unlike Phenomena, but also the songs. So I was kind of keen to steer Dario, and I say Dario rather than Lamberto. Lamberto wasn't that involved really in the music, but to steer him more into a sort of British goth thing, you know, which I thought, though heavy metal obviously has a lot in common with the imagery in terms of horror films, I liked the whole sort of dark gothic element that was in a lot of British music, you know, in the 80s.
This is an announcement for the Transcendental Run. Due to a derailment, there will be no other train.
So I did a deal with a record label called Beggars Banquet, who had a lot of indie bands, and I decided, you know, to present Dario with some of those alternatives, you know, a lot of which he really, really loved, like Dead Can Dance, you know, this fantastically sort of ethereal and slightly threatening, odd atmosphere to the music, which I think sits better in a horror film than sort of thrashy, in-your-face stuff. I mean, obviously that really worked well. Iron Maiden in Phenomena, you know, it's great. It's in your face and it's a chase and it's exciting, but there's nowhere really to go with it. And I found a lot more of the British music more sensitive.
Happy birthday to you, Sally. Happy birthday to you.
I mean, I could talk for a long time about putting the soundtrack together for that, because there's some hilarious things which happened. I mean, most of the tracks in it happened during the party. You know, the sort of setup to the whole thing. And Beggars Banquet had a lot of people that worked well in that. You know, Peter Murphy from Bauhaus. I'm struggling to remember all of the people that were on it, but most of them were playing in the party. But I thought there was a Smiths track. The Smiths were not on Beggars Banquet, called Panic. Panic in the Streets of London, which I thought would be fantastic, you know, as the sort of blood starts dripping through the scene. So that track is playing at the party too.
Panic on the streets of London.
Let's go to this party that we got. I didn't think that's great to get. Yeah. Hey, Doris, come on, send that.
And I have to say, I had to get Morris's permission to use a Smith song, because I think Morrissey was notoriously squeamish. You know, he's a famous vegetarian who just released Meat is Murder. So I do believe this. I don't think it was bullshit, but I wrote to him telling him what the film was about, and I told him that it was a kind of allegory about the media taking over people's lives, which in a sense, you know, I do strongly believe, though one will be hard pushed to say that, was that, you know, the core of the movie is not like an intellectual film. But I wrote to him saying that it was, you know, an intelligent sort of take on you know, literally people from the TV world taking over. And there is that fantastic scene at the end of Demons 2 where he's smashing where the demons are trying to come out of the screens in the TV studio, and he's smashing the screens to stop them to get there in time. You know, and I thought that was quite an appropriate summary of it in an intellectual sense. Anyway, Morrissey said, yes, okay, so we used the Smiths on that as well. We also had the Art of Noise on it. I mean, I was just trying to... It's funny, I mean, of course, it was just a gig for me in the sense that it was my second movie. So I was still very green about the whole thing, you know, and about how music works in films. But I suppose I did respond to this idea that it was sort of allegorical of Demons 2 in a way like that, and the first one is about, you know, the coming out cinema screen, and this is about the TV world. But I did like the idea that this wasn't just kind of idiotic, to try and give the thing some kind of thoughtful music or some sort of thoughtful take on it. So yeah, I was trying to subvert it in a way, and I was very much trying to put a British stamp on it too. What was curious about this is that of all the Italian films that I've done, and there have been, I don't know whether I've done 25, 30 or something Italian movies, Phenomena was the only one that I actually did in Rome and worked in Rome and in a recording studio. Demons 2 was the first in a long line of films which I did in Clapham, southwest London, and that I would go out to Rome, as I did, to meet Lamberto and sit in the cutting room, the old Moviola cutting rooms, you know, it was all on 35mm tape. And I sat and talked through with him, certainly. But I had so much freedom, really, far more, actually, than one does these days, in that we would really talk about where the music should go, not really what the style of it should be. I think there was a lot more trust between directors and composers back then. It sounds like it's in the distant past, but in the sense that they would trust you to go with your instincts about something. And so, we had discussions about where it would go, but I took a VHS tape back to Clapham and did it in my sort of makeshift bedroom studio. And that's how I did many, many Italian films. And in fact, there are quite a few Italian films where I have never met anyone involved, actually, because at a certain point, friends of Lamberto's or friends of Dario's would actually ring me up and say, we're doing a film, we're still shooting it. We need an action theme, make it 5 minutes long. We need a tension theme, make it 5 minutes long. Oh, and a love theme, make it 5 minutes long. And and they tell me the story over the phone, and I would go and write the music and send it to them. An extraordinary way to work when you consider now, you know, everything's all synchronized, you do it all on your Mac and everything, you know.
Let's get out of here! Move your ass! Get out of here!
What I thought was rather wonderful about the way they used music in the Italian films then was that given this process, and I would then sometimes witness what they'd done with it in the cutting room, they'd put a piece of music up against the film, and when it stopped working, when it just didn't suit the images anymore, they just cut it into another piece. So there were no subtle crossfades. There was no kind of attempt to make it you know, I don't know, smooth. But I think the effect of this was like sort of broad strokes on a painting. It was like it propelled you through the movie. You know, it's like it suddenly changes, but actually it works very well as a process. What was very clear was that they were trying to branch out and make films for the international market, and of course the hilarious aspect of that for me was that the stage when I would get the films to write the music was before they'd been dubbed into either, you know, all English or all Italian or whatever country they were selling to. So they would try. I think they were trying too hard to internationalize the thing, so that you would have actors. You'd have like a German actor who would speak German in his lines, and an American actor, you know, in the American drawl, and Italian actors. So I was really hard pushed to understand what was going on, having all these different people, and of course then they would dub them all into their various languages. But I think that was the thing which made me feel like they're trying a bit too hard here, and it's actually diluting the product, if you like. I think that's the worst thing about films, is that you think they're trying too hard to appeal to Americans or English-speaking people, and I think that's partly why they sort of sealed their own fate, really. Because actually, I think what we all wanted was the Italian stuff, you know. Yeah.
There's no fucking way that's enough to keep him out!
I don't know! I gotta get something else there! Can I have
Take this! I'll hang on to this!
What are you doing?
Hey, how the hell you use this thing?
You read the instructions!
Remove the pin.
You're all muscle and no brains, boy!
How can I put this? I liked it. I mean, some of it is, and perhaps it's the appeal of it, you know, sort of quite cheesy, really, you know. But I think a lot of the effects are fantastic in it, actually. And I think there's quite a hardcore of people around the world who do like the sort of Stivoletti, you know, real effects, awful though they might be, and the sort of weird little gremlin thing that comes out of the little boy's stomach, you know. It's hilarious, but it's also what makes that stuff fun. And it's not particularly scary, but it's stylized. And I think that's what I liked about Demons 2, and what I like about Italian horror is it's so stylized, much like the spaghetti westerns are. And that also that, you know, no matter what they were, the bad dubbing is part of the appeal of it. Really?
Sorry, thought that.
You idiot! I don't want him to come. Otherwise, you're gonna leave. Just get out of here. I mean, will you all get out of here, please? Get out!
I think I did come out to Rome for some kind of screening somewhere. I don't have any real memory of what it was, but I just wasn't around for most of the releases. You know, I would usually come back to Rome with the music of any particular film and tell them where I'd written it for, and they put it on, you know, apart from the ones where I never met anyone, obviously. But no, I had no idea either that anybody would ever see these films. I mean, I had just no idea that there was a worldwide audience for it. And it wasn't until much later that I started getting calls from people like Richard Stanley when I did Hardware and Dust Devil. And even Danny Boyle was another Argento fan. So a lot of the British stuff that I got, Tarantino too, actually, they contacted me to do From Dusk Till Dawn, but which didn't work out for a number of reasons. But yeah, I had no idea that people would ever see this stuff. But evidently, the kind of VHS revolution was going on in video shops all around the world. So it was quite a revelation to me that what I was doing wasn't just a kind of weird localized phenomenon, you know. Demons 1. I believe, maybe I'm wrong about this, but Michele is the demon because he was an actor at the time and was Dario's AD, assistant director. I believe I did meet him around about the time of Demons 2, yes. And of course that led immediately on to his movie, variously known as Aquarius or Stage Fright or Bloody Bird in France. But yeah, so it was like I was sort of getting sort of drawn into this whole sort of family of people of connections in Rome. Stage Fright was great. I mean, I'd met Michele, you know, and I liked him. And he asked me to do the film, and I said yes, just on the basis I hadn't read a script or seen anything. And when they finally sent me the film, I mean, I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I think Michele is, and I don't know why he hasn't carried on making films. I think he was one of the most talented of that bunch, really. I loved it. It's for me, it's one of the best ones that I did of that sort of period. Yeah, no, I think Michele is a very talented director. Well, you know, my relationship with him has always been very good, and I think he trusted me to, you know, to do a good job on those things. I mean, I have to say, I listen to a lot of my early scores, and I feel deeply embarrassed about a lot of them because they're so simple and they're so repetitive, and they're, you know. But then I just sort of became a film composer. I learned on the job through all that stuff. I mean. I think the problem for Lamberto was that he really was churning them out at a certain point, and I think there was one year I did 4 or 5 in a year, and they were reusing the same sets on different bits of the films and things, and it became some kind of business thing, really. I think I don't know what kind of deals he had, but obviously he was churning the stuff out for TV. And I felt like it was, yeah, some of them were not so great, but some of them were good, actually, and had really good sort of things to them, things about them. And as I said, you know, I think part of the appeal of it is not that they are the most sort of fantastic high-budget things. They are what they are. They're sort of low-budget, and that kind of sort of creaking cheesiness is part of its wonderfulness. Well, I think my attitude's definitely changed, you know, in recent years. It's funny, I think I spent sort of 15, 20 years just not understanding or just thinking this was not an important part of my life. And it's, it's only now that I really understand what a loyal community horror fans are, and just how so many people grew up with these things that I did, and that I actually do really appreciate it. I mean, I appreciate a good horror film now. I just never chose to go and see them, you know, when I was working on them. And I do think, I mean, it's weird. When I was younger, I just did not want to be scared. I didn't like being scared in a film. But of course, working on them, the state that I got them in, especially with people speaking all different languages and there being no music, they weren't actually scary at all. And of course, that made me learn very quickly that music is a really important part of scaring people. For me, I am now a film composer as a result of the Italian film industry. It had nothing whatsoever to do with the UK film industry. I mean, I had just so little to do with them for 10 years. They had no idea who I was. I was just existing in Italy as a film composer. So I'm very, very grateful to them all and to that whole scene because, you know, it's given me a career.